Evening and welcome to the April 14th, 2020 Select Board meeting. We are conducting the meeting over Zoom. I have this 3-page document I need to read, and I also will need you guys to give your names in just a little bit. So as a preliminary matter, I am the chair of the Select Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and you can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. State your name, please. So Peter Carlson. Peter, you're muted, hon. You're muted.
There we go. Someone won bingo right there. Peter Carlson, affirmative.
Okay, Doreen DeFazio.
Doreen DeFazio, present.
Ed Prisby.
Edward Prisby, present.
Donna Stock.
Donna Stock, present.
Jennifer Thomas, present. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Rebecca Meekins.
Rebecca Meekins here.
Tim McInerney.
Tim McInerney here.
And anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. I have Greg Marr.
Greg Marr here.
Ray Mead.
Ray's here.
Eric Swenson.
Eric's here.
All right, we may have some join us later, but that's who we have now. I will announce them as they join. Good evening. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you will find posted on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature some public comment. For this meeting of the Select Board is convening by Zoom conference as posted on the town's website. The Zoom link is found on the agenda. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Meeting materials. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda, unless I note otherwise. Meeting business ground rules. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold off until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after the members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. The chair will first read public comments or questions received in advance of the meeting, followed by the real-time board or applicant responses. Public comments during the meeting will be conducted through the question and answer feature on Zoom. The chair will read the real-time comments or question typed by the computer participants in real time. Finally, each vote taken in the meeting will be conducted by roll call. Sorry, we have to do that at the beginning of every meeting. So first, I'm going to cover some announcements. The Grafton Food Bank is no longer accepting food donations, but they are still in need of monetary donations as they are giving out grocery store gift cards to their clients. You can donate by visiting the food bank website at www.graftonfoodbank.org. We want to remind the residents that the brush dump remains closed. Also, the Recreation Department is sponsoring a town-wide scavenger hunt. Week 1 is currently going on and there's still time to participate. Drive around town or walk through neighborhoods, keeping social distancing and respecting people's properties by staying off their yards, and try to find as many objects listed in the hunt by the end of the day, Thursday, April 16th. All details are on the Recreation Facebook page. If you miss this week, join in for next week. Those are our announcements for today. Next, we have public comments. So just as a reminder, public comments will be taken up until 2 p.m. of the day of the meeting, but please send them to bos@grafton-ma.gov. We seem to be missing some comments because they're coming to us individually. If it comes in through that central email, it allows them to be properly put into our packets. There is the question and answer feature during the meeting. I will not be reading every single comment. Last meeting, things got way too long. I will try to, a lot of the comments were basically the same question. So I'll take the relevant questions on the matter we're discussing, and please direct the questions to the board, not to individuals. Remember, per the governor's guidelines, I'm not required to read every single public comment because ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. So if it was a public hearing, I would, but it's not. But I'm going to do my best to read them all. But it got really cumbersome last meeting, so I'm going to do my best to try to cut those down a little bit so that we can get through this meeting in less time than the last one. So I'm trying to get everybody heard, but I'm not going to read every single one verbatim like I did last time. Thank you for your understanding. We're just trying to get the meeting to move along. So public comments. Peter, do you have some public comments that came in before too?
Madam Chair, I just have a couple. There were people from last week that their letters were overlooked for whatever reason because of the abundance of correspondence we got in. But one of them was from Richard Whitney addressing the letter expressing his opposition to just renewing the town administrator's contract at this time. I just want to acknowledge that we did receive that letter. In addition to that, I have Mila Puama reached out to the select board as part of Parent Professional Advocacy League, advocating for improved access to mental health services for children, youth, and their families. Children's Mental Health Week is the first full week of May 3rd through 9th. She is asking if Grafton would participate by signing a proclamation to honor mental health awareness. At that point in time, that's all I have for public comments at this time.
Sorry, there was nothing from Mr. Yeomans?
I'm sorry, that wasn't in my immediate packet. Give me 1 minute and I'll pull that up. Yes, there was. She did include that, my bad. There was one letter from Mr. Bill Yeomans, dated today. Good evening. We ask that the Community Preservation Commission be charged to develop and approve a warrant article for the Select Board to consider and approve, placing such article on the warrant for our upcoming town meeting that would allow for Grafton's Community Preservation Act funds to be used for emergency financial interventions when a family or individual is threatened with eviction or losing their housing as a result of this COVID-19 epidemic. Grafton has a sizable number of rental unit housings, individuals and families of all ages, including seniors, some of whom will need financial assistance when faced with the eviction and or loss of their housing during these troubled times. It is imperative that immediate action be taken on our request, as the need for this type of assistance could soon be upon us. Thank you for your thoughtful and timely consideration of our request. Quarterly, Bill and Pat Yeomans.
Thank you, Peter. I do have one Q&A. Jeremy Graves is here. I do not see you, Jeremy. I'm concerned that you might be joined not as a panelist, but just as a regular attendee. So I don't see you on my list of the panelists, but I know that you should be. So if you can try to get on that way, that'd be great. Thank you. First item on the agenda, we have a coronavirus update. Tim, do you want to take it away? Oh, there you are, Jeremy. Gotcha. Tim.
Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to cover for the past, 3 weeks, we've been working hard with the Board of Health and the Health Alliance to get information out and provide information to the community. So I'm just trying to find some notes that I had written earlier today. So I was going through the rest of the report. So as of today, we received notice there were two new cases reported as of today to bring us to a total of 33. The reason why we're working close with the Health Alliance is about data and breakout of these folks that are impacted. We're looking to look at things by age and whether they're in hospital or if they're at home. There are some in recovery. I don't have that exact number, but there are people that are in that 33 number that are recovering. The Alliance and the City of Worcester, we're trying to figure out the best way to report those numbers in terms of the total new cases and then the total that are recovering. So those are our pieces that we're trying to work on for the community and for the board. My hope is to, on the meeting on the 21st, to actually have someone from the Alliance in to talk to us about just the overall health and recovery of their program and their activities. As you can well imagine, the City of Worcester has 715 cases, Shrewsbury has 89, Holden has 28, and Leicester has 14. So just an experience claim in terms of the communities inside the Health Alliance and what they're dealing with. They have to call those impacted people they've come in contact with. There's hours upon hours of documentation that goes along with having a case reported, and those people, the unfortunate 33 in Grafton, have been very cooperative with the rules relative to self-quarantining. So we appreciate them and their efforts to keep us safe by staying home. So those things are important. We have no issues relative to that. So that's the first part of the report. Again, I'm going to try and get someone in from the Alliance. If the board have particular questions ahead of that, get them to me and we'll get them to you. I'll get them to the Alliance first and then get them answered. I'm going to run through some things that we did from the week of the 13th on. And I'm going to say it now, I'm going to say it at the end. There's a lot of resources out there, and there are a lot of people that may or may not have access to social media or to website or to local cable. And I just want to encourage people that they can call this office. They can call here, and we will be a conduit for them to reach those resources. So whatever I go through here in terms of day-to-day operations or business opportunities or relief programs from the state or the Chamber of Commerce or whatever, if people miss something or if they have a question about their particular situation, they can call here. We may not answer the phone right away, depending on who's standing right in the office, but we do return phone calls pretty quickly, and I'll kind of go through how that whole system works now that we're mostly working from home. So we had one plan relative to rolling people in and out of this building. Most offices have 2 to 3 people, no more than that. And we thought we could rotate people in to ensure the longevity of the operation. So if someone else got sick, that the other person wouldn't be sick and they would be here. But thanks to the school department and some donated equipment, PCs, and some quick work on our IT end, we were able to get a lot of people out of the building and work remotely. And those people work remotely both to answer phone calls and questions of their department head And the general public that has emails, obviously they have a computer with them, they can respond to emails, and they can do work that's necessary to be done. We do have a feature for voicemail to email, which is an important thing. When we bought this phone system, we wanted that capability. We're able to launch that, so it's expediting the calls that people are getting, and it saves time for people to have to call in to punch in a code. It actually comes to their email and they can listen to it right on their computer. So we're just trying to use that as a way to be efficient and get effective callbacks to people that have questions for any number of matters, including COVID-19. To date, we have, including the school, 550 employees. We've probably had a number of people tested for COVID, but no confirmed illnesses, which is great. At least I would never know that, to be honest with you, but anecdotally, nothing's come back to me either relative to anybody being ill. So the cleanliness of this building, I know I've covered this before, so it might be redundant. We still have work crews here. There are a lot of, it's a 57,000 square foot building, and there's a lot of doors. So if someone goes out a door, they're old, they don't close all the way. We do sometimes get the general public coming into this building, even though we're closed. And we still have high frequent touch areas that are being cleaned, whether occupied or not, just so when we do reopen, we know we're guaranteeing their safety to the public and to the working folks that this building is clean when we return to normal operations. At any given time in this building, there's probably 5 people. I've been here every day for 3 weeks, and the rest of the folks work remotely, and it seems to be working. But again, I said it once, but the custodial staff deserves a lot of praise and attention and thanks for their diligence in following the protocols we've set up to keep us clean and safe. So I want to say thank you to them. Again, thanking the school departments for their PC, for loaning us Apple computers to allow us to work remotely has been a great asset and really enabled us to launch a continued operation plan successfully. Regarding the schools, they've launched an online learning program. Jay's done a great job. His administration and staff has done a great job. Going through the lunch program with them, they do serve students 7 days a week. They get 2 lunches on Monday, 2 lunches on Tuesday, and 3 on Friday. So they're trying to meet the USDA recommendation for students. You can email or call Dan Gale to coordinate delivery as well. So if kids are in need of food, they have an opportunity there. And again, Jen mentioned it at the beginning that the food bank, while not accepting food donations, they still can donate funds to the Grafton Food Bank, which we greatly appreciate. Early on, we looked at local cable as a resource. We do have 3 channels that are provided through Verizon and Charter. So we stand at the ready, if you will, to help the school department if they needed to utilize cable access. Obviously, they have their own channel for education, but if we needed to do something for online learning that's different or different engagement, and the library for Town of Grafton is also ready to help online learning to keep it robust and fresh for those students. And they have programs and emails that they've been sending out to the membership that have library cards as well. So trying to provide those resources to people, for their kids and for even the parents that have to do that, become that teacher in this crisis. So all of this is under the guidance from the governor. We are adhering and waiting for every press conference that he gives. We all participate in different organizations on different calls with, if it's Council on Aging, Elder Affairs, Mass Emergency Management, whatever it may be, every staff member has those calls and then reports back if there's anything we need to do or do differently. Some innovations around building permits. We've actually had a couple building permits that were done in terms of inspections done via FaceTime. If they can be done that way, we want to do that. We have all of our public meetings on Zoom, which we're all benefiting from. And there actually has to be more accounts given to allow more committees. The longer this goes on, we want to continue the operation as best we can. So we will have more executive accounts of Zoom so people can have multiple meetings for longer durations with more attendees. So those will be purchased and rolled out over the next few months to boards and committees. Relative to mail, just small things that we've done. We've contacted all the vendors that like to get paid by us. We can access banking software remotely. So we can pay bills. People can always come back into the building. We've told all the vendors that are seeking payment to email us their invoices as opposed to mailing. So we had some trepidation about handling mail, but we now have a protocol with that. So department heads come in, we get it sorted, distributed, and then processed as we go. But everybody so far has been very understanding in terms of delays in invoicing. But so far, we've been pretty robust in doing warrants for both payables, and obviously payroll happens without question for both the town and the school. We do encourage all people that owe taxes to pay online. They do have the drop box at the municipal center, but we do not accept cash in that box. A lot of people, most people do not put cash in, which is great, but we just want to encourage them to use a check if they're going to use that box if they cannot pay online. Obviously, public safety, obviously a big concern. So we coordinate police, fire, and the ambulance company, which we all know was privatized, with CERT and emergency management. So those things happen on a regular basis relative to outreach, coordination, and safety of the first responders. So the chiefs and even Ray, who's on the call tonight, and Nick Childs help us coordinate that. And then from a business perspective, just again, providing the conduit, there's an SBA loan program to help businesses that are hurting to make payroll, that can get kind of bridge loans to keep those employees paid and on payroll. We make sure that John Allen has reached out and has a resource sheet for those businesses so they can learn about those programs and make the right contact. Relative to unemployment, all of our press releases that we do, we try to contain pieces of information relative to SBA loan, unemployment compensation, and we've had great interaction with the state and the state delegation to again be a conduit to get people connected to resources that they need. And I know that the board has a concern, and we just heard a note from Bill Yeomans about the renters and those in need for housing assistance going forward. Chris McGoldrick, who's the town planner, is doing outreach work now to find out if there's either state agencies designed to do that or if there are funding mechanisms to offset those costs for those impacted folks as well. So I know it's near and dear to some folks' heart, and we'll try to put those pieces together moving forward over the next week as well. I'm trying to see if there's anything that the board might want to see. I will tell you that Congressman McGovern did call my cell phone. Not sure how he got the number, but he did call me, and I did remind him that, tax incentives like they used in 2008 don't work for a nonprofit municipality. So he was aware that unemployment costs that we might have to bear are borne by the taxpayer. So if they can offset that somehow, some way, that would be appreciated. And having a tax credit is not going to work for the town of Grafton. A lot of the business resources we have from CMRPC, which is Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, they are doing a impact study for businesses. We put that out to let people log in and so they can gather information just to see what the impact is to the local business community in Worcester County. So the Small Business Relief Fund, Corridor 9, Blackstone Valley, Chamber of Commerce, all those websites have the same information, but again, just another resource, another receptor, if you will, to get information, which we have all those in our toolkit to connect people to those particular pieces. Unemployment is a big thing. I thought it was interesting. One email I sent to Michael Moore, actually the outgoing out of office reply had a detailed response. If someone was emailing them about unemployment compensation, it told them what they would need in order to help them move through the process. So they were taking a very proactive approach to get that information ahead of making the call back to the individual. And with that, as always, as I stated at the beginning, 508-839-5335. If we can connect people to these resources, we want to be here. That's why we're here. We're here to connect them to that. So if anybody who can hear this or see this knows that we're here, we'll answer the call and we'll try to connect them with the resources that I just ran through very, very quickly. So that's my COVID update. If people want to see other things that are important to them, tell me and I'll do the research and we'll find resources that make more sense to answer those questions.
Thank you. Can you just mention, you mentioned it briefly, but can you talk a little bit more about the mass mailer that went out?
Yeah, we were worried in a couple conference calls about some segments of the population that are vulnerable, that may not have internet access, may not have social media, may not have family and friends around in this area. So we did a 2-page, and Becca can show this too, I think, if she can share a screen. It's just, and a lot of people contributed to this too, so you're making me really think about, how this team came together. But, we struggled for 3 days trying to figure out how do we do a mailing list for all these people. And, we pulled together and we figured out a way to do a direct door mailing to get into every mailbox. So that's on your screen now is the document that went out to every postal customer in Grafton. And, we vetted this through the Board of Health, MRC, the police department, a lot of different folks. It's a double-sided document that we got out, within 2 days. And we thought it was pretty good in terms of just giving people information that maybe didn't know we were in a crisis. I'm sure that's not necessarily true today, but there was a time that we took phone calls and people had no idea what was happening 22 days ago. So we thought this was an important resource to send out, and we got that turned around pretty quickly. But a collaborative approach. There were a lot of people that helped put this together.
Thank you. Ray, did you have something to add? You're still muted. Oh, maybe I need to unmute you. No, you don't have anything to add. Okay, got it. I got it. All right, Ray is signaling that.
There we go. No, I got it.
Okay.
No, there was just a thing this week where we gave some PPE, masks and gowns and things like that back to MEMA for them to distribute to hospitals and other people that need it, because we're okay on it. So right now, and we can also get it back as soon as we need it. So that was pretty much it.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is vote to appoint a member to the Economic Development Commission. So, Tim, did you want to set this up?
Yeah, I think you have, I hope I have the right agenda in front of me. You have 2 candidates for 2 positions for EDC?
I actually believe we had one drop out today.
As of today, okay. So no, actually, I don't want to set you up. I just will tell you that the charge called for some at-large membership, a finance committee member, a board of selectmen member, and 1 or 3 business, and we should probably revise that. We say business owners on the document. It should be, I don't know, business people, business person. The owner is very specific. I think you have some flexibility in terms of, whether the last person that came off was a realtor in town. And if you want to replace in kind with business owner or business person, or, a general, you have that flexibility.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. DeFazio.
I just want to add on to what Tim said, because I, as you all know, represent the EDC as a board member. And we obviously the board is in charge of the EDC appointment, so we can do what we want here. And, Eric's here on the call. So, and we don't have any other candidates that have applied for this position, but I just want to make mention, we're not meeting right now. The EDC is not meeting right now. And I don't know if we take the opportunity to check with the EDC committee chair and ask if the board would rather have, especially during, this time, if it makes sense to have representation from another business owner. Because I think, now more than ever, having a business owner fill the vacancy might be good for EDC. Not saying that Eric wouldn't be. So I just wanted to communicate that. I don't know what the board thinks about it, if we want to wait and check with EDC, or if we just want to go ahead and vote Eric in on this appointment tonight.
Okay, Mr. Carlson, I see your hand up.
Madam Chair, I move the board appoint Eric W. Swenson of 59 Depot Street to the Economic Development Committee.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion, we didn't, Peter, you're quick. We didn't give Eric the opportunity to say a few words, so.
You're
I will
absolutely
do-
right. My bad.
That's okay. That's
Sorry,
okay.
Eric.
I will ask Eric if he would like to say anything. Now's a good time.
Sure. Can you guys hear me? Great. Yeah, so thanks to the select board for having me on tonight. I'll be brief because I know you got a busy agenda, and you had a busy agenda last week too. So yeah, I'd love to join the, thank you, Barry. I'd love to join the EDC. I got involved in volunteering for the town a couple of years ago with Finance Committee in 2018. That's been a really good experience for me, being a young parent, first time homeowner. And what has become apparent to me on Finance Committee is probably apparent to everybody else on the select board, that it'd be great to increase our commercial tax base. And I kind of look at Finance Committee as making sure that the town is spending money wisely. I think EDC is a more fun, exciting role in that you're looking for new money. I think that's always better. So I talked with John a couple weeks ago about my interest. I've met him a couple times during Finance Committee hearings, and would love to volunteer for the board. I'm not a business owner, but I guess I would say I'm a business person. I work for Amazon Web Services, and I've also worked for Salesforce.com, which is a marketing software company. So I do feel I'd be able to bring a good perspective to the committee in terms of helping businesses leverage technology, perhaps helping them navigate getting their products on Amazon if I could. And overall, just like I said, support commercial development in town. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Eric. Do any board members have any questions for Eric? Donna, stop.
So now this would bring 2 Finance Committee members onto this board commission? And what's the rest of the representation?
I can speak to that.
Doreen, yep.
Yep. So, well, Eric wouldn't be considered Finance Committee rep. He would be considered member at large, even though he's on Finance Committee. So we do have one other Finance Committee member, me representing as select board member. We have 2 business owners and 3 people at large with this appointment. So, and the charge says we have the opportunity to have more business owners, which is why I brought it up. Or, the charge reads, this is perfectly okay as well.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
DeFazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Stock eye.
Thomas, aye. The motion is carried. Thank you, Eric, for volunteering.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, we have vote to appoint 2 members to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. This, again, I believe we initially had 3 people, but I believe now we are down to 2. And we have 2 candidates with us on this call. We have Jeremy Graves and Greg Marr. So before we get a motion, I will open it up. We'll go to Greg first. If you want to say a few words about your background and your interest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been a Grafton resident for about 22 years now. Involved in a lot of community organizations, looking more into getting involved in town finance with all of the financial uncertainty going in. I'm good with numbers, and I'm an engineer by training and software engineer by trade. So I do a lot of work with numbers and financial things. So I've been looking at what the town needs are, and I noticed that there's a lot of work to be done in prioritizing capital planning for the town. And I saw that there was a vacancy on the committee and decided that this would be a good place to get into helping out with the town finance and town politics.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Greg? No, you must have covered it. Oh, wait, Donna Stock?
Actually, I'll reserve my question for later.
Jeremy Graves, do you want to say a few words?
Be happy to, as soon as that works. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening. I appreciate being considered for the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. I really became very aware and interested of what this group does through the activities around the attempt to rewrite the bylaw last year. I was an active participant in that discussion. I found it fascinating, and I also ground my teeth a little bit just because it seemed like there was some low-hanging fruit to maybe get the whole town better synced up in terms of planning. Not that there's any great deficiencies, but just feeling like with different pockets of people doing capital planning, we might be missing an opportunity. Let me start a little bit backwards. I'm a 15-year resident of Grafton. I have a great passion for this town. I'm an active speaker at town meeting to mixed effect. The stuff I support tends to go down in flames, but that doesn't prevent me from wanting to put forward the ideas that I think will move this town forward. And in the CIPC, I saw an opportunity to help build a clear, cohesive plan that encompassed really everything that this town is dealing with. And now, especially, we need the best options available. We need to make sure we're all pulling together. And I think the CIPC has an opportunity to do that in a non-confrontatory way. That it's a way of helping knit together the different organizations that have budgets, that are making capital investments in this town. I should mention I am an IT manager at TJX. I am comfortable. I have extensive experience managing multi-year, multi-million-dollar budgets and manage a large team of people. I do have a background in municipal financial software, but it goes back about 15 years. But I have familiarity with how the town overall is structured and how Massachusetts operates at a state level. I'm a soccer coach, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Graves? All right, I do not see any questions.
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Carlson?
I move the board vote to appoint Jeremy Graves and Greg Marr to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee for an indefinite term.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Mrs. Stock?
I'm just wondering whether or not there's a little bit of conflict of interest with Greg Marr and whether or not he'd have to recuse himself when the school committee needs would come before this committee.
Mr. Marr, do you want to answer the question?
I don't see a conflict there. There is already a school committee representative on the committee, and this would be a member at large position, not a school committee representative position. But if other people have concerns, I'd definitely be willing to listen to them.
Mr. Frisbee?
Madam Chair, benefits that inure generally to the community don't raise the issue of conflict of interest.
Oh, sorry. Any other comments? Okay, I have a motion and a second. Hearing no further discussion. All in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Stock eye.
Thomas, aye. Motion is carried. Thank you for serving.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have vote to appoint Kristen Remillard to the Agricultural Commission for a one-year term as a non-voting member. Mrs. Remillard sent an email to all of us shortly before the meeting, so I just want to read it real quick. To the members of the Select Board, I would like to thank you for your service to the town of Grafton. I hope you and your families are doing well during this trying time. I wanted to reach out quickly to thank you for your consideration in the one-year non-voting opening on the Agricultural Commission here in Grafton. I would be excited to learn more about local government and agriculture with Daniela and her team over the next year. I will not be logged on in for tonight's meeting as a panelist, but I will be viewing the meeting as an audience member. I understand I submitted this message after 2 p.m., but I just wanted to send a note to express my gratitude to the board. Wishing all of you well, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Sincerely, Kristen Remillard. I know it came in after 2, but because it is directly speaks to this agenda item, I wanted to get it in there. Any comments or questions?
Madam Chair, just want to acknowledge that Kristen did come in through the attendee section, but not as a panelist tonight. She's just echoing the same thing of your email, but I just want to make a note that she did leave a message in the chat section, and I reminded the public to please use the Q&A section if they want to address us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion or any other questions? Mr. Carlson?
Madam Chair, I move the board vote to appoint Kristen Remillard to the Agricultural Commission for a one-year term as an alternate non-voting member.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing, oh, I just saw unclicking of mic, so by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Frisbee,
DeFazio.
aye.
Stock eye.
Thomas, aye. The motion is carried. Thank you so much for volunteering, Kristen. I think that's great. All right, just a note to those at home and just to the rest of the people in the meeting. Mark Terry has joined the meeting, so just to let everybody know that. Tim, should we not skip over that emergency paid sick leave act then, if Mark is here?
Yeah, we're going to take it to give him time to get through other family related stuff. If he's here and we can do it. Becca knows this pretty well. So maybe she can start and then Mark can, if there's anything we're missing or if the board has particular questions about the act. That's why we have Mark on the call as well as for executive session. So I would kick it to Becca and then we can go to Mark.
Okay, great. Becca.
Sure. So these are 2 policies that were put forth by Mark. He's requested that the board adopt these policies. They've both sort of resulted out of the coronavirus pandemic. The first one is an emergency family medical leave policy. So essentially what this does is it will grant eligible employees up to 12 weeks of emergency FMLA beginning April 1, 2020, if an employee is caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed as a result of COVID-19. So it's really somewhat of a supplement to the existing FMLA law, but it relates directly to effects from COVID-19. And then the second one is an emergency paid sick leave policy. So similar to the first one, a result from Congress, from the coronavirus pandemic. The emergency paid sick leave policy allows for eligible employees to get emergency paid sick leave benefits if they have tested positive for COVID-19 or they are awaiting test results. So it's really to allow for employees to have additional time so that they don't have to deplete their existing sick bank if they are directly affected by COVID-19. So Mark, I don't know if you want to elaborate. That was a brief overview, but.
Yeah, thank you, Becca. Now you summarized it quite well. What I'd say for the board's consideration is these policies are in alignment with the federal law, as Becca alluded to, quickly to try to develop policies that could be adopted and implemented right away. This is part of the bill that passed in the last week or so of March. Implemented regulations came out on April 1st. And so you're moving in a timely manner to adopt these, even though the law itself went into effect a week and a half ago now. So I do recommend you adopt these policies.
Do any board members have any questions for Mark? Mr. Prisby.
This question is from Mark and or Becca. According to section E, page 3, it looks like to be eligible for EFMLA, all employees are required to provide the town with documentation as specified in applicable IRS forms, instructions, and information. And then there's a note that says the IRS hasn't released the forms yet. Once the forms are released, who's going to be the point person for the town to administer the program?
So I actually can speak to that. Becca and I communicated on that particular line earlier in the day because I had an opportunity to see how the forms we developed were modified, and had recommended taking out that highlighted section you're referring to, because that really was a guide for people who are modifying our models to implement. What I've actually recommended at this point is to simplify that down to just simply say the town can require documentation supporting the request for leave. And the reason for that is we developed these policies based on the statutes, and then when the regulations came out, they tweaked some of the certification rules. I've also provided Becca and Tim with copies of model certification forms, things that align with what the regulations say. So I wasn't sure whether or not that modification would be given to the board today. But my suggestion is that we just tweak that by saying that the town can adopt or can require documentation, and eliminate the highlighted language you see there, as well as the end of that first sentence that says, so the sentence right now says, to be eligible for EFMLA, all employees are required to provide the town with documentation as specified in, and that was what you were reading. If it just stops after documentation and you remove the rest of that paragraph, that's what I would suggest at this time.
Okay,
there's the next paragraph, there's also an introductory clause that's not necessary because it refers to the IRS guidance. And to point out for everybody's benefit, the reason why there's reference to the IRS is because there's a tax credit associated with these leave statutes for private companies. That does nothing to help the town. When we develop models, we try to develop one model that would apply for all types of employers. But this was one modification that we could just eliminate, because at this point, there is no tax credit that's available to the town as a municipality.
Mr. Prisby.
Just a quick follow-up to that, Mark. Thank you for the explanation. So just for the benefit of the folks watching at home,
Yeah.
If they want to take advantage of these benefits, do we specifically know what documentation we want them to provide, and to whom specifically are they providing it?
Yeah, so the certification forms that I provided to the town earlier today outline specifically what's required for each type of leave.
Okay.
And the policies, I think, already spell out that these are available through Human Resources, which I believe is Becca.
Okay.
Is that right, Becca?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. So we would, in this way that we have employees apply for just standard FMLA right now, they get the forms from Joan Chase, who's a part-time HR analyst. She walks them through the forms, lets them know what they need. Once they've returned everything, she and I review the forms to make sure that they've produced everything that's required, and then it gets filed and recorded. So we would follow a similar procedure for both of these policies.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Madam
For
Chair.
Mr. Carlson?
Mark, thank you for that explanation on the, on section E there. So you just need a motion to basically omit the language after the second paragraph at the end of documentation period, beginning with as, and strike the remaining part of that paragraph, and then strike the third paragraph after that to be read in the
You can-
motion.
I guess if the board could make a motion to adopt that policy as amended. So right in terms of what you've just outlined, Peter.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can make the motion to adopt as amended.
All right, great. Thank you. Madam Chair,
Yes.
unless anyone else has any questions, I'll make the motion, but I don't want to disrupt if anyone else has any other question.
Go ahead. We can discuss after the motion too.
Okay. Madam Chair, I move the board vote to adopt the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act EPSLA policy as amended. And
Peter, if I may, the amendments were in the EFMLA policy.
I'm sorry, I was going to get to that policy and the Emergency Paid Family Medical Leave Act EFMLA policy as amended.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I am not seeing any. Sorry, I'm not seeing any discussion by roll call vote.
Carlson, aye.
Stock eye.
Aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. The motion has carried. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we have select board reports. Are there any members of the select board that wishes to share a report right now?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Mr. Carlson?
Thank you. Last week I received a phone call from a woman who provides accounting services for local business here in Grafton. And she had asked if what was going to happen with the property tax due date of May 1st. I didn't understand what she was talking about until I reached out to Representative Meridian asking him, did Massachusetts pass any legislation to delay or anything about property tax? And sure enough, he did forward me some legislation that I would like to bring up at the next agenda to see if the select board would implement any of the options in the COVID-19 emergency legislation that was passed a few weeks back and signed by Governor Baker. The following things to consider for the next agenda item would be an option to delay property tax due dates to June 1st, option to waive interest and penalties for late payments, and non-termination of services to residents due to late payments. And that would be it. So if there wasn't any objections to that, I'd like to do that at the next meeting, so that way there could be additional information provided to the members. I also asked Mr. McInerney, if we do go forward with this at the next meeting, to have available to the select board just the financial analysis of our cash flow, just so we can make a better informed decision. Thank you.
Sorry, Peter, can you repeat the last item that you had said? I missed it.
Sure.
So
The last item that we would consider is non-termination of services to residents due to late payment.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other select board members have a report? Tim, TA report.
Yeah, I'll be brief and I'll start with small, easy stuff first and work our way up to bigger, more important pieces. This will be the third Saturday. We have the recycling center open up at DPW. People are practicing social distancing. We are open from 8 to 1. People pretty much stay in their cars, load the materials into the loader, and then once it's filled, they just dump it into the bin. So it's been working out very good, and we don't even, the 3 weeks, this will be the third week, and we haven't had any incident. There are a couple emails relative to the brush dump, and I know some members have kind of pinged me on this as well. But the rain we've had this week, it certainly can't be opened because the mud is just, cars will just sink as they go through that area, which has been the case for 20 years. But because we have a senior work-off program where potentially those seniors are at risk because they're over 60 years old, we need to maintain social distancing guidelines there especially. So we wouldn't have those senior work-off people, so we'd have to have staff do that. There's questions, why do you need staff? Well, if it's not staff, there'll be contractors that'll go there, and there'll be other people dumping refrigerators and everything else in there that we just don't want to have done. And that's why we have people manning the gate. So just to provide a little clarity, we want to have it, but we have those two impediments that we need to prepare for, which we hope to do the following week, weather dependent, and being able to man it to provide the brush dump. Obviously with the storm yesterday that came through, people can pile it once, hopefully it stays in one place, and just be patient. We'll try to get it open as quickly as we can. The senior center reminded me that they apply for grants from time to time, and Harvard Pilgrim Community Health gave us a mini grant for $500 for supporting our initiatives for a new transportation van for the senior center that we have in our capital plan. While it's a small amount, the work that the senior center does for their seniors to get good transportation for the folks they transport to medical appointments and shopping is unparalleled. So we appreciate their efforts. Yesterday we had a S&P call with Standard & Poor's for a bond rating for the short-term borrowing for the final $1 million for the DPW, and then the notes for the bond anticipation notes for the library. Last May, we enjoyed a 1.684% interest rate. We hope to get a sub 2 when we do this again. S&P has recently, I won't say downgraded the municipal bond market, but they really have a lot of trepidation around it. But I think we had a good story to tell relative to our fund balance and to our poise relative to economic development and what we're working and embarking on with Pine Street and all of Route 30. So it was a pretty good story. So I look forward to having them affirm the AA+ rating and giving us short-term rating for the bond anticipation notes of an SP +1, which is the highest rating you can get for a short-term borrowing. I won't know that until the 23rd, and then sometime in May, the board, I don't know how it really works. You remember last year you had to sign a ton of documents, so we'll have to maybe leave them at the police department for people's leisure to be able to get them at dispatch. Actually, with that point, can anybody offer any feedback to me on whether that worked for members, leaving those documents down at the police department? Was that okay?
Yeah, it was super easy.
All right, so we'll do that again for other items, if that's all right. The LED light project, couple hiccups even as late as 4:30 today relative to the gateways. The gateways allow us to get information about the lights that are being installed. So we are working on that first thing tomorrow morning, but they are installing the lights starting tomorrow. But we have some back of the house stuff to do. A lot of power outages. Westboro Road, that road was closed. I don't know if it's reopened as of today, but as of 11 a.m. it was still closed. But there were trees down and a lot of power losses throughout the community. But they are working to restore power and get those roads reopened. Pine Street, as I mentioned last week, I just want to cover one quick thing. One of the bidders, when we did the review, was disqualified because they just didn't meet the minimum submission requirements. So we have 3. The goal was to have a recommendation to you for the next meeting, but Mass Historic and the Historic Commission for Grafton has an opportunity or has the right to review those bids as well. So those submissions were sent out today to Mass Historic for their input. Just to review, again, as we drill down on this, because they have a confidentiality piece in their submittals, I'll just refer to them as groups, and I'll just give an overall assessment of what they're offering to put on this 8.8 acre site up at Pine Street. So group 1 is at 222 units, selling that, purchase price to the town is 1.2 million. Caveat there is we split those proceeds with the state of Massachusetts under their sales partnership agreement. This group 1 also requested a 15-year TIF at 75%. In my mind, that was in our criteria rating, we said, hey, less conditions, the more favorable your proposal would be. That's a pretty stiff condition. Group 2 was 1,725,000. They had no contingencies relative to use of CPA or Affordable Housing Trust or TIF funds. They do have a rather lengthy due diligence process, which I think is reasonable to be expected. And they're looking at 304 units, which is a lot of units, but it's not engineered. That's just what they're hoping they can get on this particular parcel under the current zoning, but again, not engineered. And then group 3 was 177 units with a full $2 million purchase price. And both group 1 and 2 had a commercial space component that exceeded our 10,500 square foot commercial space component. So in those areas, they were certainly considered highly advantageous. Group 3, when we looked at their financial performance today, found that they do have an Affordable Housing Trust kick in, if you will, that totaled $900,000. So that was, in my mind, is not a good deal for the town. So we're getting very close to making a recommendation for group 2, if you will, but we do need Mass Historic's input and the local historic groups input before we make that award. So I'm hoping that comes back to us shortly. I'd like to get it under an agreement in the P&S signed sometime in May or June, with a closing hopefully September, October, and then they can start the process of permitting and building. And by next spring, we'll be either rehabbing buildings or knocking building down, depending on which group we choose to sell to. And then finally, MJ Market was the last, not the last, but they were most recently had a compliance notice sent to us from Cannabis Control Commission that they were in compliance with the bylaws. They went through the planning board process. We double checked with staff relative to their compliance with those bylaws, and as long as they adhere to the requirements under planning, they will be. So we sent our documents back to the CCC. So 2 weeks ago, I reported that Resonate was one, and we sent that back, and now MJ Market has given us theirs. Now they have to go through a process at CCC to get a provisional license and then a permanent license, which happens after they're built and everything looks and operates the way the CCC believes it should. So it's one step along the road, but we are expediting those as quickly as we can. And that will conclude my report.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Tim? Doreen?
Hi, Tim. Thank you. I just wanted to know if Mass Historic and Local Historic had any sort of timeline or deadline on their review.
It's a good question. Because Joe Layden was helping us with the original document, the only piece I was ever aware of up until today was a 10-day review period before we put it on the street to open the bid up to have people solicitations. So I asked Elizabeth today, who's the director at Mass Historic, and she said as soon as she can get through them, she'll turn them around. So they had 10 days for the review ahead of us, putting it out on the street. So I'm hoping that's the case on the back end as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tim? Nope. All right, moving on to correspondence. Mr. Carlson?
Madam Chair, I believe I read everything in the beginning there under public comment. I don't have any additional correspondence to read into the record.
Okay, first item under discussion, Grafton Strong gift account. Tim, do you want to set us up?
Yeah, thank you. So this is a result of our last meeting and questions and comments and feedback that we got. So the long and short of it is we talked to Barbara, who's the Director of Council on Aging, and we thought she'd be the best person to kind of administer the program. So we did this draft relative to the procedure, the policy, and what it means, and the purpose. There's a lot of vagueness relative to this. We have a lot of faith in the COA and its director. She administers the BAG program for us, for seniors and for income eligible folks, and that's been going on for 8 years anyways without a hitch. And then, the fuel assistance program and, various other programs that help seniors and those in need, from transportation to elder services and Meals on Wheels. So obviously I think she's very well respected and trusted. So I want to promote her as the person who will kind of oversee this account. The documentation's super vague. So things that, are customary practices for the director to see, if there's a layoff letter, if there's a proof of residency, loss of insurance notice, an application that we can develop, which you can be very consistent with the fuel assistance program or even the BAG program, we could do that. On the second page, it talks about upon approval by the director, the information without names will be forwarded to the town administrator, who will be responsible for validating the need and approval of final recommendation. So I would be flying blind in terms of her documentation to me. I think it's an expeditious way to do it in terms of efficiency to get people money as quickly as possible, but I have no problem if that was to be 2 members of the select board, provided they can review that documentation from the director and turn it around very quickly to get these people what they need or what the recommendation is from Barbara quickly. So I wrote it in terms of how it would be, but if there's any trepidation relative to me overseeing that, that's it's fine to have 2 members of the board or some variation thereof. So I'm not set in my ways here on any of these particular pieces. So having said that, I've given you the long and short of the policy. I didn't know if you had particular questions, thoughts, concerns, or things I should modify to make it a more robust policy to help those in need.
Okay.
Peter, did you have a question?
I did, thank you. Tim, thank you for putting this together. I really appreciate you protecting the confidentiality of the applicants. One of the questions on the assistance for essential expenses, a lot of people have no longer utilized landline phones, and I noticed that we have cell coverage in here. I understand cable and internet and so on and so forth, but my recommendation, I think, for me wanting to approve this policy is to make sure that we're covering telecommunications voice. But I understand, not typical cable TV, or internet access. Although I could argue that I think some people who may need essential services that may, need to pay for their internet bill for their kid to attend school, that could also qualify for an essential expense. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but that's my only input at this time.
Any other comments from the board?
So just to be clear, it would be, we're just utilities, you would include telecommunications as a utility?
Madam Chair, if I may, yeah, Tim, I would include telecommunications, but I would also consider internet if it can be for essential services to maintain internet connection for students to be able to access their curriculum. So you could have a family making, that needs to pay for basic internet access in order to maintain, their school curriculum.
Okay, I get it.
Okay. Any other, Doreen?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just would echo what Peter says. I think that's a good idea, and I trust that the director will review the applications, on a case-by-case basis. And if it's something, a necessity like, phone service through a cell phone only, or certainly children in the school system who need internet access, I think that should be added as well. So good catch, Peter.
Any other comments, questions? No? Donna?
Wondered how much has come in, Tim, since last week? Do you have an accounting of that?
No, it was 1,000 and change last Tuesday. I haven't checked as of today. I can get it to the board.
Is the board comfortable voting on this tonight, or would you like to see the changes in writing and then come back next week? Peter?
Madam Chair, I'm comfortable with the changes, and I'm willing to make that motion tonight with those changes, as long as Mr. McInerney understands the spirit in which the changes need to be reflected in there. I'm perfectly fine with doing that, unless the committee decides that it wants to wait another week and bring it back and have it in actual writing in front of us.
All right, I'll take a motion then.
Madam Chair, I motion that the select board approve the Grafton Strong gift account policy. The purpose: to document the process the town will ensure to consider requests by persons, groups, and organizations requesting compassionate support and/or financial assistance due to the COVID-19 to support housing, utility, food, and/or other medical expenses from the gift account titled Grafton Strong and established at the April 7, 2020 Select Board meeting. With the changes under assistance for essential expenses to include, but not limited to, cellular coverage for telecommunications and internet access for essential services.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Stock eye.
Frisbee, I said Frisbee aye. DeFazio aye. I was looking at you.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. Motion is carried. Thank you. Next.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
sorry, I had my hand up during
Oh,
discussion, but a little bit late. I just was curious, how are we going to promote this? That's probably a question for Tim.
Yeah, the usual means and methods, the newsletter for the senior center, local press releases, word of mouth. We know, from a senior perspective, those in need. So those are, but Facebook, press, website.
Tim, you're cutting out a little bit. I don't know if I'm the only one having trouble hearing you. Can you?
Local methods, from Facebook to the website to, we know we have constituencies that are in need now. Did most of our employees know who they are, and if they think they're going to fit into a category and have a need, this gives a little bit more flexibility for those folks that they know that are in need now.
Thank you. That's great. That's what I wanted to know. So Barbara and senior staff will be reaching out to individuals that they think would qualify for this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on, review draft annual and special town meeting warrants. Oh, wait, Peter?
Madam Chair, with your indulgence, I want to apologize. Last week, the whole correspondence thing and doing this remotely, guys, like I said, I got NASA over here trying to make sure I cover everything. There was a piece of correspondence that wasn't read during last week's meeting that I meant to read during this week's meeting. If it's okay with you, do you mind if I enter it into the record tonight?
That's fine.
Thank you. Second. This was sent in from Colleen Roy. Hello, BOS. I'm writing today to request the BOS consider creating a Zoom policy for messaging meetings going forward, that if a panelist has the ability to be on screen, that they do so when talking. Recently, we have seen both the TA and the ATA on screen for other meetings, but were notably absent on screen for most recent BOS meetings. Pre-COVID, they would have to be visible to the public. I asked this in the new post-COVID era. We are navigating. We try to remain as close to business as usual as possible when it comes to who's visible during meetings to avoid any confusion. Madam Chair, please consider adding this to the April 14th BOS agenda as it has not been set at this time. Thank you, Colleen Roy. Thank you, everybody.
All right, review draft annual and special town meeting warrants.
So, yeah, I'm unmuted. All right. I'm gonna, Becca's gonna have to unmute too, because we're gonna try to take you through this. We have some time, but there's some things I just want to get clarity from the board on relative. You voted on the date for June 20 for town meeting. I'm sure you don't want to meet on a Saturday at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the evening. So I'm gonna ask you if 10 o'clock is okay for the special and 10:30 is okay for the annual. But we'll take one thing at a time. So the special, 10 o'clock, that okay? All right, so I'm gonna put 10 o'clock in there. So Article 1 is to adjust the budget. A lot of housekeeping stuff. We do it every year. We don't have any detail for you now because things are still fluid. And when we set and sign the warrant, we don't have too much detail. There will be adjustments. The chief was lucky enough to get a grant for 911, so he'll be able to offset some salaries from expenses and so forth. So there'll be some internal operational budget adjustments that'll be made under this article. So I don't have any detail with that, but again, a housekeeping item. Article 2, snow and ice. We're looking at 81,000 in terms of a deficit right now for snow and ice. And we do have, I think right now, enough money in various warrant articles we can use to erase that deficit. So that's the goal as it stands right now. Prior year bills, Article 3, I think we have one bill that's sub $100 from the police department. I forget what the category was, but it's a bill that got missed. And so that's the only one we know of now. I know, Becca, do you have any other detail on that one?
Not at this time.
Vacation, sick and buyback. Again, it's just the folks who may retire. It's a housekeeping item. We have a bylaw that allows them a portion of their accumulated sick time and obviously their vacation buyback. If they retire, they get, everybody who upon departure gets their accrued vacation paid out anyways, but we'll make that appropriation. And I'm not so sure, we might have a couple people in the fire department relative to this, correct? Or not the fire department, but do we have anyone going, Becca?
No, we haven't received notice from any employees at this time.
Okay. And then CPC is just the balance for Affordable Housing Trust for 53,000. There's an easement at the beach. We had some work done by National Grid, and we never allowed the easement on that property to get that utility upgrade to the beach. So it was a miss by us in terms of getting that to town meeting ahead of time. But I believe it's an underground utility, so it's not, impinging on any poles or any overhead trespass. And then 7, to extend the leave provision under Article 20 of the personnel bylaw. So with COVID-19, there's not a lot of opportunity to take vacations for folks. We do allow 10 days to be carried over starting July 1. So what I would ask the town to allow us to do is if people had vacation, couldn't take it as a result from March until July 1, allow the flexibility, allow them to carry over more than the 10 days that it's allowed in the bylaw right now. I don't have a balance to tell you what it would be, but I will tell you that difference from the 10 to 15 or whatever the number is, the caveat in the motion would be it has to be used within that calendar year. So just in terms of protecting us and not carrying that liability. But I do want to acknowledge the employees that work under the bylaw that aren't taking vacation because they probably can't because they're needed to work and there's probably no place to go anyways. But I want to have that flexibility for them. So that's what Article 7 does. Article 8, 8 Pine Street. We talked a lot about this, but you voted to take it. through a sales partnership with the state of Massachusetts. Now we need authorization to dispose of that land. So we would need authorization from town meeting to sell it. And obviously the details I've covered earlier will be, fully vetted and disclosed ahead of that, well ahead of that meeting in June. And Becca, there was one more for 27 Upton Street. Am I doing that at the annual?
Yeah, Upton Street's on the annual.
All right, so that's the special. Does anyone have any questions regarding those 8 articles?
Mr. Carlson.
There we go. Thank you. Tim, can you just go over Article 7 one more time for me again? Extend leave provisions under Article 20 of the personnel bylaw.
Sure. So right now, people that have in excess of 10 days come July 1 can carry over with the town administrator's authorization those 10 days. I'm assuming that there will be people that are under the bylaw that will have more than 10 days come July 1 because they weren't able to take vacation in March, April, May, or June, I'm assuming. And I'd like to be able to allow them to carry over more than those 10 days that are currently allowed under the bylaw.
Okay. And is there a fiscal liability to us if they carry them over?
If
And
they
do have to use them or lose them, that type of thing?
I want them to be able to use the difference between 10 and whatever number they want to carry over to use in that fiscal year. But I haven't worked out the detail. As I mentioned earlier, vacations payable upon departure. I don't want that to be, if they leave me July 15th, they carried over 10 extra days and then they quit, I don't want to pay them for that 10 days. So that's a legal nuance I have to work out with Mark. Maybe it's just considered paid time off as opposed to pure vacation. But I'll have to work on that component because I don't want to have that liability.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right.
So those are the 8 we have, and I'll work out that detail.
Any other questions on the special warrant, special town meeting warrant? Okay, moving on to, can you just tell us, Tim, when do we need to sign the warrants?
It needs to be posted 14 days prior to, so I'm going to guess that's the 3rd of June.
Okay.
3rd of June, something in that ballpark.
Okay, thank you. The regular warrant.
All right, the annual, again, Saturday, June 20, 10:30 start time. Obviously, that can change if the special went longer, but that's what I'm shooting for as long as everybody's in agreement. Seems like we backed into that, so I guess we have to be. Article 1 is to hear reports of committees. Again, it's just a standing article. 2, housekeeping relative to the appointment of Nelson Park and Trust. 3 is the town share of the net operating costs for Blackstone Valley for the regional school district, which went up a little bit, which we made a budget adjustments for. I won't get into that detail, but it did go up because student enrollment went up. The interest, it's debt excluded, but you vote to raise and appropriate it every year. So you'll pay the debt and interest. I think it's 24 that it rolls off. I can get you that detail, but the same questions come up every year, so I should probably be better versed to tell you when that debt rolls off and how much the balance is, but I can get that for the board. Article 5 is the fiscal 21 year budget, excuse me. And we'll cover that, the details there later on in the meeting. Article 6 is a contingent budget, much like we did in 2014 for the consideration of the override. We worded it the same way, depending on what the school needs and what the difference to be raised and appropriated will be, the number will fit right into that first sentence, provided the override were to pass the following week. Article 7 is the capital budget, which is on file with the town clerk's office now. Transportation bond bill, this is all chapter 90 money. Again, relates back to our broader discussion relative to fiscal 20 and using transportation bond bill money or chapter 90 money to offset operational costs inside of public works. So we'll have more discussion on that later. Article 9 authorizes the board to enter into contracts to spend those dollars from chapter 90. Article 10 authorizes the spending limits for revolving accounts. I just want to tell you, this is a nice sheet. You used to, if you go back 8 years, you used to do these individually as individual warrant articles. Ray can tell you, they were, you did everyone separately. So we created this nice chart, and it tells you what department, what the revenue source is, the funds to be expended for only those uses, and then the fiscal years that it covers. So there's nothing new on this list unless Becca tells me there is. I don't think there is.
There's nothing new on the list, but Article 11, just to draw your attention there, this revolving account that's under the Recreation Department's purview is being changed to a different type of account so that the Recreation Director has more leeway to utilize those revolving funds for recreation operations. If you recall, during the budget process, she had requested a full-time programming person. And at the time, you know, we were not able to fund that, unfortunately, but she did express to us that if she could get the type of revolving account changed, she would be able to fund a part-time person strictly from her revolving fees. And so this article will allow her to do that beginning in FY21.
So that's Article 11. Article 12.
Wait, one second. Mr. Frisbee?
Thank you,
You have a
Madam
question?
Chair. Yeah, I do. Just a comment really on 10 and 11. It occurs to me through all the budget process that we go through every year and through the one that I experienced in FinCom, we don't typically get to see the income coming into these revolving accounts. It would, I think, put me a little more at ease with this if we could every year while we're doing the budget see the income from these revolving accounts in their present balances.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's that. Yeah. Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay.
Hold on, let me, I just, why, because he said that, I want to make a note of it now, so I make sure I get it right. Let me see. All right. Anything else on 10 or 11?
I don't see anything else. Go ahead.
Supplemental insurance, this is a housekeeping article. You know, obviously we have volunteer firefighters that come in, they have full-time jobs, they get hurt. You know, we created a fund to compensate them if they were to become not incapacitated, but injured on duty, basically, to bridge the gap from their wages from their work if they were to be hurt while on duty for us. 21, the cable budget. This was a requirement under the Municipal Modernization Act to have the cable TV budget voted separately. I might actually move that. I don't, Becca, one of the drafts you sent me, I actually had this one moved up under budget. So I would, in terms of placement, the warrant becomes the board's, but I'd recommend that we move this under between 7 and 8 and make this one 8. Not to make it confusing, Becca, but if you can make that 8 so we can keep all budgets kind of together. But again, it's the board's warrant at the end of the day. So if you want to keep it, you can certainly keep it. 14, authorize treasurer collector to borrow money, a standing article that happens on an annual basis in anticipation of revenue or borrowing. They can, or other state aid, they can borrow money to do that. Obviously, the fail-safe there is the Board of Selectmen has to sign those notes. So there's full awareness that if she were to borrow money, the board would be the only group that can sign for that, for those funds. Unemployment compensation, we raise in an article every year of 50,000. So we'd look to put 50,000 into the unemployment compensation fund, which is self-funded because we don't want to pay, I think it's 1% of our payroll into the state. So we're self-employed relative to this, and this for 10 years has pretty much been sustained with this appropriation on an annual basis. And with not having right now either balanced budget or post-COVID, we don't anticipate, you know, override to fail or not fail. You know, there's one reduction that we know of inside the school department. If the override were to fail, and this fund would compensate them for unemployment purposes. Funding for transportation services from WRTA, the buses we have and the people who drive them, probably 70% of their pay is paid for from WRTA. So I think that's an important thing, housekeeping item for the board. 17 is a funding for police department equipment. This was part of the budget, and now we're taking it out to use one-time revenues for that replacement of those mobile radios. So it goes to a larger philosophical question about, creating the budget for fiscal 21, but we have it in there because it's the mechanism in which gets us to a balanced budget and still gets the police department mobile radio replacements.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. Tim, on that, I'm great to see that we're getting the mobile radio replacements and the data terminals and all that. Are these just like individual items that are like, they're purchased on a regular basis, or these irregular purchases? In other words, I'm trying to figure out, are any of these things in excess of 10,000 and should be considered capital versus in a separate warrant article?
Becca, can you answer that? Because I think it's 17,000 is the total.
So for Article 17, the total is 12,000. The radios that are now out of warranty, so they are purchased not yearly, but regularly on some recurring basis based on the police chief's best estimate. I think technically they probably do qualify for capital, but they weren't submitted as part of the capital plan. They were submitted in the budget and were initially to be funded. However, as a result of some of the reductions that we've had to make in light of COVID-19, Article 17 and 18 both got pulled out of the operational budget. So the adjustment was made after the capital plan had been set. And so these were put into the annual town meeting warrant to be funded with one-time revenue. They are equipment, but they were not initially intended to be funded in this matter. I don't know if that helps.
Well, they were originally in the budget, in the operating budget. Whether they're in the capital plan or they're in this warrant article, it's still the same funding source.
Peter, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers my question. Like, I know where the funding source is coming from. I'm just trying to see, I understand that the timing wasn't right and stuff, but this does qualify for capital expense. So we're still encumbering capital expenses in operational line items within the operating budget, right? So I guess it's more of that philosophical discussion. We don't need to solve that tonight, obviously. This stuff's important. And, it may be something I want to bring up in the future. Just, I understand the timing and the budget changes and you got to pull things out and stuff. So I'm fine with it here. I just want to just bring up that this is technically capital. Well, not technically, it is. And it should be something that we should be tracking in one area. That's all. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ed?
Yeah, just briefly, I don't like to repeat what other people say, and I certainly don't like to repeat myself, but it's always possible to pay for operating expenses out of one-time money. It's just that you don't want to do it, and it's a bad leading indicator. But we already know that. We already know that we're brushing up against the dire need for an override. So we just want to make note of this so that in the future, if we do pass an override, and, things move on years down the line and somebody wants to take operating or cash out of capital or one-time money for operating expenses or vice versa, and they resort to saying, well, we did it back in 2020, we need to make note that, well, we did it then this way because we were in the position that we were in, and it's not something that we want to lean on moving forward.
Any other comments or questions on Article 17? All right, moving forward. 18.
Again, on 18, it's the same situation where we had this in an equipment line for the fire department. There was a need that the chief put forward. It's pretty detailed in terms of the need. It's probably a mix of general operation stuff. If you can put general operation stuff in an operating budget, it's great. And then the next year, looks like you have a reduction in your operating budget because you don't have to buy those capital things again. But because we can't make 21 work under this current funding scheme, we had to look to other sources. So you look to one-time revenues, whether it be free cash or stabilization, to fund the items that are necessary. If you wanted to include 17 or 18 in the budget back up where we were, and you would have a motion for town meeting for Article 7, that would, include the use of one-time revenues in your operating budget, which, we can pretend it's smoke and mirrors, or however we want to phrase it. It's 6 one, half dozen the other. We're trying to break out things that fit into a category of one time, so we can show bond rating agencies, which will rate us, which hopefully they rate us favorably, so we can pay less in interest, saving the taxpayer money. So we break them up. So there's transparency and trackability, and those bond rating agencies can see clearly that those pieces were pulled out for that purpose. So that's what 17 and 18 does. There's never a good solution if you don't have enough money in the operating budget to buy capital equipment for those departments. So this is the solution we came up with. If there was a better one out there, I would certainly be pitching it to you, and not this. Article 19, amend Article 39 of the general bylaws. Again, this is the number of recreational marijuana establishments we have. It was under Article 39 of a previous town meeting. So we had a 20% number, and based on the math, it yielded 2 licenses. We have right now 3 signed host agreements, 2 moving further down the road of approval. This warrant article looks at a 50% increase, which would yield 3. The only difference in this one than in any other one is the submitted by. This is a departure. The charter allows for the town administrator to submit articles that are convenient, that he or she thinks should be before the body. And I've gone back and forth with this whole idea of marijuana for a long time in terms of recreational programming. And this one here, while it's blank, is not something that I will put a town administrator title next to. So if this was to make it onto this warrant, it would have to be a vote of the board relative to this submittal, because I don't see the wisdom in it. So I have my own hangups with the fact that marijuana, in my mind, is a gateway drug, but that's a whole different story. I realize we're cash starved, but we have 2. I got to think that 2's the number, but it's just not going to be submitted by me, but I do have it on here for the board to discuss and consider. And you don't have to do that now, but I wanted to at least present with what it could look like if you wanted to move it forward. Article 20, disposal of property at 27 Upton Street.
Wait 1 second. One question, Tim. We have a question, Mr. Carlson.
Yeah, thank you. So Tim, I know we want to let the town make this decision for us ultimately, but you want us to basically submit this on our behalf, but not your behalf. I'm fine with going to 3 to make it work. We want to be able to capture any possible revenue source, especially now. And it would be, personally, I don't think we should take this decision out of the town's hands. Let the town ultimately decide what it wants to do with this. So if you need a decision for the Suns tonight to submit this, to sign this warrant, is that what you're asking us, Tim? Because we were just going to go right over it, and I wasn't quite sure.
No, there's no request for you to sign this warrant tonight. You have until, like we talked about, June 3 or June 4th, the 14 days prior to, so you can make this decision anytime up until that point.
Okay. Madam Chair, if I may, can we add this discussion perhaps at our next regular agenda meeting for this article?
Sure.
Thank you.
Also, when we talk about it at town meeting, if we could not describe this revenue source as a gateway drug, that might be helpful.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's just my personal opinion. It has nothing to do with the article.
Okay. Any other discussion on Article 19? Moving on to 20.
Article 20, disposal of property at 27 Upton Street, the old DPW barn. They're going to move hopefully May, June, and that property will be vacated. I'll know that we got a grant from the state to look at the reuse of that with Horse and Whitney. And they've done a study, we've done some soil analysis, and now we're still trying to decide whether we do more excavation of material once they vacate under the floor to see if we want to clean it before we sell it, and then what those terms and conditions are under 2 decision trees if we were to clean it, what that bid document looks like, and if we don't and sell it as is and sever that liability for whatever might be left behind. So we're going through that whole process, but we do need approval from town meeting to sell the property. So hopefully, before we get to town meeting, we'll have a lot of those pieces ironed out, because that parcel is shaped like a key, as you well know, and the barn, the tree barn that's there, that space that stores cold storage is important to the operation of Public Works, Recreation, and the cemetery department. So we need to find a way to, if we give that barn up, we need to find a way to replicate it someplace else. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but first step is to get approval to dispose of the land. And obviously we want it to be a mixed use into the community for gateway purposes. And there's been a lot of study around that anyway. So that's kind of like where it's coming down for a mixed use component. It will nowhere be near, what 8 Pine is, so forth. But we've had a couple meetings relative to village mixed use with planning, zoning, staff, and other leadership in the community, obviously pre-COVID, back in January. So a culmination of that will happen leading up to town meeting for Article 20. 21, acceptance of 93 North Street. We did some study of the soil there. We thought there was something reportable, but it doesn't meet the reportable level, so we're retracting that. But there are some questions, so we've asked Conservation and Recreation for their recommendation relative to the community accepting this property as a gift for passive recreation. But there were concerns when we did the initial testing of the soil in the area, which we're still working through with staff. So this is more or less a placeholder. 22, acceptance of property, Lottie Drive. This is a piece of property that was conveyed to a homeowner, and a piece of the road was conveyed in that conveyance. So the lawyer reached out to me, I reached out to Jenny Kramer, and the last I got back to Jenny, given everything else that's going on, it was either going to be a town meeting vote or it's something that the Board of Selectmen can rectify. So it may or may not be on the next revision of this, but it's a placeholder nonetheless. 23 is authorization for surplus property. Right now we don't have any, but as things become available that are in excess of 25,000, I think needs town meeting approval. It needs town meeting approval to dispose of that equipment. Again, more of a placeholder than anything else. And then there's a lot of CPC, which I have no more oxygen in which to tell you these rest of these pieces. So Becca, can you do 32? Unless people want to go through those. Well, actually you probably do, because Super Park is on there and that's a conflict with another petitioned article. So maybe I will just run through them real quick so people know. I gotta go back up, I'm sorry. CPC reserves, it's listed out in terms of the appropriation of the reserves for each account for Article 24. 25 is the Pell Farm bond payment. It's the 12th of 20 to be paid. Townhouse bond payment, 6th of 20 to be paid. Institute Woods Recreational Trail feasibility study. This is really part and parcel to the North Grafton Transit Village program along Institute and Route 30. So that's what that 14,000 is for. Town Records Restoration Project.
Can I jump in just a second?
Anything, sure.
Sure, just for clarity, the Institute Woods Recreational Trail feasibility study, that was already approved. This is just an extension of the sunset provision. It's very close to being completed, but it's just in case that final bill doesn't come by the sunset provision. So this is something that had already been approved at town meeting. This is just an extension of the sunset. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Town records in the vault with the clerk's office that she wants to get restored and preserved. Recreational improvements to the Lions Club property. Basically, Jen, if you could just, it's providing a bathhouse, bathrooms, a driveway reconfiguration, which we're trying to do some of that in-house. Are there any other components to that? Do you think I'm missing?
I believe this 140 just covers the driveway.
Not very sure. Okay. Well, CPC will obviously speak to that anyways.
Yep.
And I think this is a placeholder for a super park, which will probably have more discussion for an appropriation for the phase 1 of super park, trying to coordinate the work that's being done for the library now and try to get infrastructure under the ground ahead of them doing the final paving. I think they meet on the 23rd for final discussion on all these articles, but certainly 30 and 31. 31 is asking the community to borrow using funds from CPC to pay that debt. Right now, our estimate is about $700,000 backing into what they feel comfortable affording for an annual debt service payment. But again, they're still voting on that and working through that. Can you confirm that, John, for the 23rd?
Yes, the next Community Preservation Committee meeting is on April 23rd, in which these numbers will be discussed.
Okay, 32, perpetual care. Becca, Chair, sorry.
Sorry, Ed?
Yeah, just a question. We can discuss this now, or we can wait till we get to 36 and 37, but I just want to throw it out there. It sort of made sense to me to do all the super park related petitions together rather than break them up.
That's fine. We can move them.
All right.
So just for, where do you want to move them to, so we can at least get that squared away before the next meeting?
So it made sense to me if either 36 or 37 succeed, it would change the borrowing amount and the amount that maybe CPC would want to put into the project, or maybe not, but at the very least, if I think there's about $240,000 sitting in account for this project, that might have an effect on what the CPC allocation is in direct cash and what the CPC allocation is for borrowing. Or if that's not true, then it'll at least have an effect on the bottom line, and someone will have to make up that $240,000 somehow. So it made sense to me to do those first, put them in, have those become the new 30 and 31, and have the CPC ones become 32, 33.
I agree that they all are talking about the same project, the same pot of money. I would like, if we're going to move them, I would like to see them behind the other two articles, because you're right. If CPC articles, we cannot change the amount on the floor. So if those articles do not pass, the amount's going to be the amount in the motion. You can't adjust the dollar amount in a CPA article. So if they do not pass, then it's kind of mute.
Sorry, I couldn't get the button. Yeah, I mean, it's just that if the voters are going to come in and say that we don't want to keep the money that we already have there, the $200,000 plus, it might inform them about whether or not they want to vote for the project at all. If they vote for the project and then take a look at that money, then I think, well, we could do something better with that money, but I just voted for that project. So that just seems to me to be a little bit backwards. I would think I would want to do that. To go into the project knowing, okay, we're going to vote for the CPC money, and at the end of it, we're going to have to, if we want to complete the project as presented, we're going to have to make up that $240,000 somehow, or not, depending on how the vote shakes out.
But if the first two articles pass, if CPC, the super park and then super park borrowing pass, and then the 35 or 36 pass, then the first and the other two can't go. So if people approve of 30 and 31, and also approve of 35 or 36, then my understanding is it won't matter. Then it will be make 30 and 31 mute.
So I'm just trying to follow along. So if we keep the articles as the CPC Super PARC funds first, and then get to 36 and 37, and the community says, yes, we want to reallocate the Super PARC funds that we have already set aside in one way or another, because both 36 and 37 can't pass because they conflict. Then are you saying that the articles 30 and 31 would be moot points and we wouldn't go forward with the project?
I believe that's the case, but let me clarify and we can talk about it at the next time.
Okay.
I think there has to, because of the wording of the dollar amounts with the CPA articles, the way they're written, that if there's money taken at a, is the money that they have for the project is then reduced, I think the project cannot go forward.
Okay, I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, but it is not clear. So
Okay.
I will clarify that that is the point. I could be totally wrong. But before we talk about it next time, we can get more information on that and then have another discussion on it.
Okay.
So we're gonna wait to move these if we're gonna move them. So we'll just highlight them, Becca, just to make sure we know that they may be moved downward. Article 30 and 31 could be moved depending on the clarification that Jen gets. Is that accurate? All right.
Yes.
So 30, can I go to 32? So perpetual care funds. Becca did a lot of work on the details on this relative to bringing, our labor force to bear to do certain things with perpetual care for cemeteries. So, people get buried in public cemeteries, they pay a fee, and a certain portion of that fee goes to perpetual care to keep the upkeep and maintenance of all 3 cemeteries. So we have accumulated money in those accounts for purposes to maintain them. So we want to have an allocation of 12, 12, and 12 for each to buy one piece of equipment that'll do service to all 3 of those cemeteries. But we will also have the opportunity to do other things with that piece of equipment with the existing staff. Becca, you do a way better job of explaining that than I do. So you want to try that?
Yeah, that was good. So there's a line item in the conservation budget in previous fiscal years. They would contract out people to mow the open space properties. So this past year, Leah got together with Daryl and they determined that Daryl has the staffing capacity to undertake the mowing of those open space fields, but they didn't have the appropriate equipment. So Daryl put together a proposal for us to purchase this brush mower that they could use on the cemeteries, but they would also be able to use for this open space lands. And as a result, we were able to reduce expenses in the conservation budget and leverage some of this perpetual care money that has been piling up for a while. We don't tap into it often, but it is, we think, a good use of those funds in a year where we're seeking to offset, operating dollars in any way that we can.
Well, I know Ed's next question will be what's the balance? So we'll get those balances for you.
So the sale of lots account has about $98,000 in it, and each of these 3 perpetual care accounts for these 3 particular cemeteries has in excess of $60,000. So all in all, total, it's a small dent in the overall perpetual care and sale of lot accounts.
All right, anything else on 32? So 33 fire hydrants, we accept them. We've already budgeted for them in the earlier parts of the meeting for town meeting. So these are new hydrants that we would be accepting. And then one for South Grafton for DeRocha Landing. And then the petitions. So Saturday town meetings seems to be a popular topic. The petitioners aren't with us right now, so they'll have to speak to this at some point, and then the board will decide where these actually go. Relocation of the original voted so-called super park fund. So it looks like they want to take 241. I just want to caution folks that we have a contract with CBA, who's doing some of the conceptual design and did all of our outreach work. I forget the total of that contract, but some of that 241 is kind of tied up in that. So the balance will be different than that. It'll be lower. I just don't know that number off the top of my head of what the balance will be at the time of town meeting.
Tim, I believe the balance is 241. That 34,000 is already taken out of the number.
Okay.
I
Okay, good.
believe the contract that we signed with the consultant was, this number reflects the reduced number.
All right. For some reason, I had 154 in my mind, and I don't know why, because that would be a swing of 100 grand. So, all right, that's great. If someone's done that, I mean, I can do it. I thought it was different.
Well, we can double check for sure.
All right. And then 37, again, the competing interest here relative to the 241 to spread out amongst Nelson, Norcross, and Ferry Street. And that is, that's the 37 warrant articles we have. And I think Ray was on to talk about this, right, Ray? That's why you're sitting through this.
Yeah, isn't there one that was going to transfer some money to a some account that is there is an account to transfer?
Yeah, 36 is looking to take the remaining funds and put them into what they write capital stabilization fund. We have a municipal, actually, what's the title, Becca? What do when we set it up at town meeting in 11 or 12?
So we have a municipal capital stabilization fund, which is in existence in the last 10 years or so.
Yes. 50 grand in it, give or take?
Yeah.
So that petitioner would have to change that to municipal capital stabilization account. That's pretty much it.
Mr. Carlson?
Yeah. Ray, thank you for that. Article 37's petition, because it doesn't specify a specific account, would that also need the same attention?
Yes. Yeah, it has to, if you're gonna transfer,
Yeah.
or you're gonna pretty much relocate money, it has to have a source. It has to have a source, and it has to have a place to go. So.
Any other questions on 36 or 37? For
Well,
Ray?
What's the mechanism, Ray? What are we telling the petitioner they need to do?
Well, at this point here, the board hasn't signed the warrant, so those, any one of those petitions can change, as long as they are rewritten and re-signed by the people who signed them. Or 10 registered voters. That really doesn't matter at that point. But we can't. You don't want to get those on town meeting floor and then try to change those, because then you have to have the 10 people who actually signed them there and get their okay to change it, and it really doesn't work out very well. But we've got enough time to June 3rd or June 4th to take care of that, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I do want to read. I have a question. Colleen Roy, 53 Elmwood Street. I am the petitioner for Article 36. Can I change that to municipal capitalization stabilization account now? It sounds like Ray just answered that question on how to proceed.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, it looks like we're finished with the warrant for now. Next, we have a budget, fiscal year 21 budget.
Well, we had a number of iterations on this, and I know we still have Mark Terry here, and you guys are trying to get into executive session, so.
I'm going to say good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ray.
Night.
Our position from our meeting we had on Monday with the tri-board relative to adjustments, I just want to make sure that the board, and we can do this, you know, it'll take a solid 25 minutes to really kind of get through. I want to make sure that we coalesce around the idea of what it's going to take to balance the budget, what the revenue picture may look like in my estimate, make sure we agree to that, and then agree to the approach to balance the budget. So there, I just want to make sure that no one's surprised when we, you know, we have a balanced budget right now, override or not, we have contingencies built in, but I don't want anybody to be surprised relative to the revenue reductions and assumptions we've made, we went through, and then adjustments into the operating budget using Chapter 90 to offset DPW costs, using the tree article that we established at town meeting in October and cutting the tree budget. I want to make sure that we're, you know, that we're all okay with those kind of details. So that's what I was going to go through, but I'd rather do it next week, but I can do it now. It's entirely up to the board. I apologize.
Any preference from the board?
So go ahead, Becca, put up that slide. We'll walk them through real quick, make sure we can get some coalescence around the revenues and the assumptions, and then how we're gonna.
I'm sorry, while Becca's putting up the slide, Donna, did you have something?
Yeah, I sent a chat to the panelists.
Did everybody read that?
Yep.
Is that,
So I'd like to propose that we wait until next week to get the budget information.
And we do have Becca put together a nice 4-slide thing. It's not different from what we talked about Monday. So I just want people to jump up and down now and not later when we've published everything relative to the budget.
okay, we do have a request to move that to next week. Is that okay with everybody? Peter, did you have something to say?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm fine with that. If those slides are ready for distribution, could we just get that like ahead of time on the Friday in the packet, just so we can take a look at those, so we can absorb that information for next Tuesday? So maybe help move the conversation along a little bit.
Will do, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do not have any meeting minutes that I am aware of. So that leads us to executive session. So I'm sorry, I have papers everywhere. So I need a motion to go into executive session.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr.
motion that the
Prosser.
select board enter executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, Paragraph A, Subsection 1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we're going to go by roll call. Just so everybody knows, well, first, okay, by roll call. Go ahead, Peter.
Carlson, aye.
Clock eye.
Fazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. To discuss these matters in open session may compromise the position of the town. We will reconvene in regular session only for the sole purpose of adjournment. I do want to say the Zoom executive session, so we're going to all go into executive session. So everybody else, it's time to leave the meeting. If you do not leave the meeting, we were going to kick you out. We're going to go into a locked room for executive session. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understands. Thank you for attending. And again, we will only come back to regular session for adjournment. So We are now entering executive session.